Welcome to today's BSGA sign surgery. If you're watching on LinkedIn Live, please say hi, introduce yourselves, and of course, post your questions in the comment and we'll do our best to get to them and put them to the team. Talking to the team, we've got a few people here today, which is great. Let's do some introductions. I'm Jack Gocher. I'm publisher of Eye on Display and also part of the marketing team here at the BSGA. Craig, should we start with you? Please introduce yourself.
I'm Craig Brown. Been in the industry now since 1984, and I represent the British Sign and Graphic Association as their chairman.
Lovely. David.
I'm David Allen, and I'm the owner of Allen Signs Limited. It's a 60-year-old business based in the Midlands, and I'm also the current president of the BSGA.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Sean Holdham. I've been in the industry now, as long as I can remember, over 30 years. I currently work at Fujifilm. I'm Global Business Development Director. I work both for our wide format hardware development and also with our clever people that manufacture inks in our locations around the world. So I'm looking forward to speaking to everybody today.
And Jeff.
My name's Jeff Buffton. I'm Head of Operations for the Signs Express Network, and I also chair the Trailblazer for the Signage Apprenticeship Group as well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good stuff. So, Craig, if you'd like to sort of introduce our main topic today and we can get started on that.
Yes, it's one of the... We've now had almost a month and a half of quite extreme heat, and it's one of those topics that we decided that we'd put some guidelines together just to share with our members and the trade further afield. It went out in our newsletter. We've produced 4 handouts. David Derbyshire, who heads up our technical committee and is part of the BSI group for 559, put together with his knowledge almost a crib sheet and something that would be helpful to share with staff. So it was the discussion based around that, and just trying to share information and basically to see if people were using simple processes like the toolbox tools and that type of scenario.
Okay, well, we'll get on to the toolbox tools, but shall we start talking about what are the sensible approaches for people to take when working in extremely hot weather?
Well, the nice thing is we've got several people there who run teams, so that's actually part of it. One of the scenarios I was just going to touch on when I started in the industry as a traditional sign writer, I was sent out on site to sign write a van. Being in my I'd probably say my late teens, early 20s at the time. I was standing in the glory of the sunlight. Great to be out from the centre. Decided to work on the sunny side of the van, if that makes sense, rather than standing in the shade. The problem was that the following 2 days ended up having to take off as sick with severe heat stroke. And it's kind of a life lesson, if you like. But the problem is with staff, it puts us as owners in the firing line for issues. So part of this is actually common sense. So what we're looking at is, one thing I would say, looking outside at the moment, I don't know where you are, the weather has changed so much. So if I knew that us actually posting something about working in hot weather would cool things down, we would have done this a little bit earlier. What we tried to do is look at the sensible approach to working on site. So Linda, with her artistic bent, has created a little poster. And it's just a kind of a five tips to working for operatives, and then 5 things to look out for when you're actually in heat. But probably the one I was to try and flip this round. I mean, Jeff, you've got a network of, should we say, franchisees across the UK who have staff going in and out. Is this something that your guys are aware of, or they touch on with you in the field?
Yeah, and as you said, it's applied common sense. It's being the responsible employer that actually takes care, rather than just focus about go and do the job and don't come back until it's done. It's just taking that step back. And the other thing as well, over and above all of this, which we'll go back to maybe later on, is the performance of the media. Vinyl doesn't work very well. It's like glue and toffee at certain temperatures. So this isn't just a staff welfare conversation. This is actually a media use conversation as well.
Yeah.
But it is actually being that responsible employer of choice. You start off with your welfare policy. What does your welfare policy say? Again, it's a cultural thing around how do you look after your staff. But it's basic things like have regular breaks. suntan cream gets overlooked. Wear hats. It's protect yourself from the shade. Maybe wear long sleeved shirts. Counterintuitive on a hot day, but it protects you from sunburn. You know, the whole sunstroke thing is really important. So it is all about applied common sense. Everyone interprets that differently. You have to respect that. Absolutely respect that. So, but again, it's just challenge the culture around the welfare of your team rather than just blindly do the job for the sake of profit. That's the headline bit. And thankfully, our network get that. They've been trained, not been trained, but they get it anyway. But those, you know, there has been training and talk about this for several years in the network. Thank you, Craig. So yeah, it's simple things like take breaks, take water, take cool boxes. That's an important thing as well. If you're going to have sandwiches and water, don't have them in a hot van, have them in a cool box. So it's all of those kind of applied common sense things which you just need to kind of reinforce before you go on site. Really, it should be a part of your RAMs as a part of your staff welfare.
Yeah. I mean, we had the common sense approach when we knew looking at long range weather forecasts would start earlier in the day. So again, trying to actually not work in the midday sun, being that mad Englishman. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that anymore, but it's using those common sense approaches, as you said, and making sure that the hydration thing is something that I think is underestimated as well. The thing I've actually started to see a little bit more is actually people working, especially at low level, with gazebos. I've seen that a number of times, as well as, you know, it's a bit of a fact putting something up. At least you're actually creating your own shade. So that was thrown out probably as a general one there, guys.
And you referenced it earlier on. It's working smart. It's seeing where the sun is in the building. Can you work on a different elevation? You know, first off, can you work with the sun rather than just blindly going there? And it depends on the application of the job. Some jobs are fairly small and only take an hour or two to go and do. So again, it's planning those around the day. What can be done outside? What can be done inside? So it is working smart and being aware. So it's just really taking that step back is probably the headline from all of this from me.
David, you run a number of vans with your team. I mean, do you have anything within the van, like a handbook for the staff to actually use to make them aware?
It is covered as part of the employee handbook. And it is, I think, as you both alluded to, it's trying to take a common sense approach. Now, I know that the guys will take cool boxes out with them. If they're, certain jobs, it's not possible to reschedule them to cooler times. So they go prepared for that. So they try and hit it really early. I think that's the important thing. And culturally, though, as a country, we're not quite used to this idea yet that, you do a lot of work early in the morning, have a break, and then go back when it's cooler later on. And that's something that's, I think, going to evolve over time. But we're still very much an industry that everything's lastminute.com. And sometimes customers don't want to shift the deadline. So there's an education process there as well that, if you have a good client, they'll work with you, but some aren't quite so understanding, I would say. But it is one of those things now that's covered off in the employee handbook. I mean, you're right, when we first started, having plus 30-degree heat wasn't really a thing, was it? And when it did happen, it was very isolated.
I've got this picture in my head of the builders up the scaffolding with, cut down dead. Well, sorry, that probably isn't. I should have explained that. They're covering themselves in cooking oil to get a tan rather than worrying about it. So, and the extremes of weather we're getting obviously are going to become more common. So, I mean, Lawrence, I hate to throw this one out at you, but again, you run a number of teams. Is it something that you're coming up against more regularly with pushback from working in the heat?
Not necessarily pushback, but yeah, it's something I'm certainly very aware of. Just look at me.
I was the same.
It's the things we've done. The latest vans we've bought, we've actually made sure they've had aircon, and it's just not something we've bothered with in the past. But these days, it's just even that they've finished the work, they can get into the nice cool van onto the next site, and they're not continuing to be absolutely boiling. And so that's one change we've made in the last year and a bit. So the latest ones have aircon. But yeah, it's what's been said, part of your booklet, just making sure they understand. Sun cream doesn't have to be on your expenses. You just buy it and we will give you the money back. It's making sure that's fine. I've not really had any pushback or any issues. It's just being understanding and caring, basically, doing what you can.
Well, thanks for that. And again, I last one finish off with Jeff. The fact that you've probably got the biggest range of age of staff across. Do you find the youngsters have more of an issue than the I'll say the OAPs, people of my age, let's put it that way, I'll be that diplomatic.
No, I think as long as you're going into it thoughtfully and responsibly, and people aren't being asked to do stuff that they don't want to do, then generally we don't have an issue with that. You're right. We've got hundreds of people in our network, from young apprentices through to people maybe coming up for retirement. Put it politely, it's usually it's just making sure the young ones think about it, because again, they're not time served. They haven't done this before. You don't want to learn by getting sunburnt. So how do we share that knowledge? That's again part of being a responsible employer. So, but we don't have an issue with it as long as, the culture is, and everyone knows what the culture is, because obviously there's fundamental things, not just about this, that run through a business, and that actually you're being asked to do things that's reasonable and responsible. That comes under HSE guidance as well, and law. So that just runs through our network. Say it always has done from I've only been at Science Express for 7 years. So, but that was a culture that I inherited, and it's a culture that's still strong today. So being the employer of choice means something. You can't just say it and not deliver it. So once you're in that culture, everyone kind of knows, everyone's empowered to speak up. If they don't want to do something, there's a conversation around it, but it's not something that I hear about, because they can see all the provisions in place for them.
So with smaller sign companies, freelance installers, that sort of thing, how will the BSGA sort of support smaller companies that don't have the infrastructure that some of your larger sign makers have? You've mentioned some tips and posters. Talk a little bit about what they can do there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been. I mean, Dave Derbyshire was kind enough to kind of break it back down into bite-sized chunks. So I sometimes think that smaller sign companies don't do things because they think it's onerous. When you try and show them, it actually is just a step process that you actually go through to educate people, and also protects the owner of the business as well, that they can show them evidence that they've actually educated their staff. We've created 4 documents, basically a hot weather risk assessment. We've got the poster that I've showed a little bit earlier, which again, I think if it was just put into the van, maybe in the glove box, is just a reminder that's always there. And maybe it's something you can, as David hinted at, maybe it's something you can actually share with your customer, just to remind them when the weather is extreme that there are things that they need to be aware of. So maybe they actually are aware that, they make sure that the tap is available for someone to fill up a water bottle, or they actually make sure there are drinks that are coming out. I'd do that out of common sense. If I have a tradesman that comes in, they probably get more cups of tea here than they do anywhere else. But there isn't always someone's focus that's looking after somebody who's providing a service to. And then we've actually got the Toolbox Talk document, which again, we've created in a simple way that then has the box at the back, so that it can just be signed, the fact that the staff accept that they've actually received it. And again, you can create it your own way, but it just gives you a template that you can physically use. But that was one of the things I've asked a few of, again, I'd say smaller companies, whether they do Toolbox Talks. And it was kind of, I'm not going to say a vacant stare, but why would we? And again, it's just something that, with the likes of Jeff, David, and other members of the board, all of their companies do it. So you make the assumption that everybody else does it. And I didn't know. But again, Jeff, if you just want to touch on...
Before you start, though, could you, maybe for my benefit and anyone else who's not sure, Toolbox Tools, what do you mean by that?
Jeff, do you want to just highlight what you see as Toolbox Talk? You probably are more...
We have lots of them. So Toolbox Talk essentially is a short, focused group conversation. You can use it as a training aid, as a reminder, as an aid memoir, but they're just short, focused, 2 or 3 minute conversations typically, might spread on a little bit. And you have a script, because obviously it becomes a part of your working processes, and you gather everyone round and you deliver that training or that talk or reminder. So in this scenario, it would be, staff welfare is really important at all times. That includes working outside in extreme heat. So be thankful of working in the sun, think about hydration, think about tools you're going to need, think about suntan cream, all those kind of things that we know obviously will make things that go along. And then once everyone, you have a little conversation or discussion about it, maybe any concerns, and then people then sign the back of it to say that they've been a part of that training. Now that works for more fundamental things around health and safety typically, and working at heights, manual handling, etc. But it can be used across any asset, really, across any touch point in the business. So that's what Toolbox Talk is as a concept.
Okay. Right, back to you, Craig. Back to your actual. That makes sense now.
Yeah, well, and again, it's a term that kind of has been adopted, and again, it's trying to make it so that it is an informal discussion, and it's educating people as and when they actually need it. So again, useful to actually to have. Again, the documents that we've created are all available on the BSGA website, and we also put a link to them in the last newsletter. So again, it's trying to educate the wider audience. And if people have questions or actually want to get some feedback on how they might use them or how any of our directors are actually using them, I think that's the thing. This trying to create a community, trying to actually explain how somebody's actually using it in their own business just takes away the mystique that's there. And I said the only reason I raised it and put it onto the topic here was that I had quite a few people, well, why would I do that? Or no, we don't. That's not something we do. And I just think people might be lining themselves up for a problem further down the line that's incredibly easy to address. And really, they should be doing it. It's part of your corporate governance, if you like.
Okay, so who is using them here? Jeff, we started with you. You're obviously using them. Anyone else? So Lawrence, so you're waving your hand.
Yeah, I'm just going to put my 2 pence in. I think from my experience, having worked here a long while and hopefully grown the company as well, I would assume everybody's doing them, even if they don't realise. But the larger companies, it's more important to get it in a formal format, get it documented, so you've got that follow-up afterwards. So I would assume everybody's doing it. They maybe just don't call it a toolbox talk.
Yeah.
But say the benefit of doing it more formally and getting it documented so you've got that traceability is something I would really recommend.
And
nodding,
I'd reiterate that because we've had a number of members who have had visits from the HSC, and the HSC want to see evidence that things are being done. And this is a prime example. There we go. We've brought people up to speed on the use of ladders, and this is the date we had the conversation, and this is so that's in your folder just to hand over. And again, it's line of sight, I suppose, is the phrase that I've always used in this terminology. Does that make sense, Jack?
It does. So if people want to use these, where are they going to find them? What's the process there?
Again, is it something that David or Jeff want to kind of feedback? Because again, you guys are using on. I mean, some of it will be if you use an external health and safety provider. A number of companies do that. We certainly did. So we took professional advice to keep us up to date. We as an association have some basic information as well, and can put people in contact with current service providers. But David, how do you keep yourself up to date? Class you as a small to medium-sized business?
I mean, we use a health and safety advisor, so we get regularly inspected by him. He provides us with a lot of templates and training for us as the management on how to use those and how to deliver them. It is all really a document, like Lawrence says, we're nearly all doing it, but sometimes we're not documenting it. And that's kind of where we are with some of our processes still, is that it's delivered sort of face to face. What we sometimes lack is the paperwork to go behind it, which is why, obviously we asked our sort of health and safety people to come in on a fairly regular basis just to make sure that we are sort of toeing the line, if you like. And I think it's like a lot of things, you look at it and it seems onerous at the start. Once it becomes a habit, it's not really an issue, but I think the biggest thing we struggle with is getting everybody together or getting the right teams together at the right time, because, we're all busy. If you say to the guys who are going out in a van, right, I need you to stay in for half an hour so we can go through all this paperwork, the health and safety stuff. It's like, do I have to? But yes, you do, unfortunately. And I think what gets forgotten is they're liable as well. There's a lot of things said about employers being liable, but the employee is also expected to carry out a certain amount of this for themselves, with us in the background. So it's that education process of like, well, come on, we're in this together. If you don't do something, you're going to get into trouble just as much as I am, until they've decided that I've not done something that I should have done. You're in the frame as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't think people realise that, because that's not what makes the news in the papers, is it? So
it's also encouraging people that it isn't an onerous task and it is for their benefit. That's where you come back, and the fact that you can document and it's signed off. is part of our process. If you, I don't have to go back very, very far when I started in the trade, and we were regularly working off the top of vans. You drove a van up to a fascia because the van didn't fall over. It doesn't. It doesn't happen. It
Great
should.
advice there, Colin. Okay, I think we've talked a lot about people and safety for them. Let's talk a little bit about, and there's probably been Sean in here as well, a bit about materials and how the heat can affect adhesives, ink, fixings, all this kind of thing. What do we need to think about there in this sort of hot weather?
Well, I think a lot of the equipment, let's start on our poor friend, the printer, or the equipment we use. They're flogging their guts out whilst everybody else is there with their sun cream on and their cold drinks and lovely stuff in cool boxes. These printers are not designed just for one location. All of us manufacturers cater for supplying this equipment all around the world into far more extreme temperatures than we see here for about 2 weeks a year. So in essence, the key to keeping your device is the temperature that's on your phone or on is not necessarily the temperature indoors. So that can elevate, and it's the maintenance of your device is more important than ever before in these extreme climates, especially when you may not have air conditioning in your unit. So with the likes of solvent that evaporates with heat, so your eco solvent inks will be then liable to be a little bit thinner because the solvents will evaporate to do a lot more cleaning process. Same with water-based. UV is a bit more stable, but again, it's making sure those maintenance procedures that you do are more you do them more than ever. Ink is very, very stable across all those platforms with all the high humidity and, of course, heat climates, because that is designed to work all over the world. When we're doing testing, we are exposing inks to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 degrees heat to create stability, to make sure that it performs in all of those regions. So in terms of that, the actual performance of your printer and your ink should be very stable, but then make sure you do the maintenance. Materials, on the other hand, PVC is synonymous with heat. Heat affects PVC, heat affects adhesives, so you need to make sure that your materials are stored in the right place. PVC will be affected in terms of its structural composition, in terms of its stability at high heat, and also when you're applying graphics to surfaces, though the temperature of the surface that you're applying to can vary massively. If you're applying to a window, you might break the window because the PVC might cause what's called a thermoshock, which will cause the window to actually break or crack because you're making the surface temperature of that fascia a lot hotter than it needs to be because there's no cooling. So again, it's all these processes that need to be thought about and looked at the surfaces. And sometimes if the temperature is too hot, you shouldn't be applying graphics outside, not just because of the installer, but because the surfaces you're applying to will not be good for the adhesive or the products you're applying out there, the stability of those materials. So you need to make sure you're aware of that. A lot of the materials manufacturers will have a recommended application window, which will give you a lot of people talk about cold weather. We're used to cold weather in the UK, and we will probably have in this same LinkedIn seminar in December when we're talking about it snowing and being minus 15 as we work towards the ice age. So it's understanding the windows of operation with everything you're doing, because if you apply an adhesive-based PVC or polyester onto a surface right now, that adhesive is not going to cure, and then you'll probably be coming back 2 days later when the temperature's gone completely the other way, and that adhesive won't have worked. So it's understanding where you're working, understanding what you're applying to, and making sure that you know the materials you're working with and their operational window for both the face film, be it whatever it is, and the adhesive you're working with. So that's kind of my thought process on there, because it can be more extreme than you're feeling, as if those surfaces are generally ramping up and getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And then, like we've talked about earlier, sometimes it might be better to do those installs early morning or even late when you're avoiding those temperatures in the midday. But take a temperature gun with you and understand the actual temperature of the surface you're applying to, which will avoid failures later on down the line. And it may be a common sense point to say to your client, I can't do it today because that window's too hot or that surface is all too hot, because I don't want to cause a failure 2, 3, 4, 5 days down the line.
Interesting stuff. I'm looking a little bit here at Lawrence and David about how you how does this affect your sort of day-to-day operations? Can you just say to clients, oh, well, no, it's too hot today, we'll have to stick this next week?
You can't just say no without a solution, as ever.
Yeah.
Luckily, most of our work is across the site, so we can often go and do something elsewhere and when it is particularly hot and come back to it towards the end of the day or at the start, as you say. One thing we have done is often if it's just one layer of vinyl, and it might be spec'd that way to keep costs down, when it is hot, that can be quite stretchy and not great to work with. So we've often laminated things purely just to increase the structure of the vinyl. It's not needed for protection, it's overkill, but it's purely for handling the vinyl. We've laminated it just to make it easier on the fixers. So we've done things like that as well.
Just,
I mean, you mentioned thermal shock, Sean. I mean, it's one that, again, I'm surprised at how few people understand if a glazed panel is partially in the sun, partially in the shade, the impact vinyl can have, obviously, by either inside or outside, especially with sealed unit, where the gases inside, the temperature can go up because the heat's got nowhere to dissipate. Again, there are guidelines on the association's website to share that information, and we made a little handout for last year for exactly the same scenario. Because again, a customer doesn't understand the fact that why is my window cracked? You're the last person to have touched it. It must be your fault. Therefore, you have the issue, your insurance that we're claiming on. So again, we can alleviate some of the issues. I was just wondering whether you're seeing any expansion and traction on substrate as well, because again, going back a while, sign industry is great at adopting materials that aren't necessarily designed for the application we put them from. And I'm thinking the good old days of foam, the Foamex composite materials now, where sometimes if they're not branded, we're not quite sure what the core material is. I know that's actually we should, but I'm saying sometimes cost comes in when people use boarding panel when they shouldn't do. And again, you see some quite horrific bowing and manipulation of panels through heat. Is there any advice you'd like to kind of pass on to the audience?
I think with all of it, it's understanding what you're using, and I'll let Jeff kind of explain in terms of a little bit more in depth. But generally, there's a lot of technical data that goes with these, and these materials are made for export all around the world. We're talking primarily as our little island just outside of Europe, sitting here thinking we're unique. But a lot of the materials that we're using that are manufactured, remember the face films of PVC, there's only a few of those around the world. Plastic is plastic. Polyesters are more stable, to think about that for your window graphics as opposed to PVC. Even to what the graphic design is and the amount of color on some materials makes a difference to the amount of temperature it will absorb. So very, very dark graphic on a window will absorb lots and lots of temperature from that and create a problem, as opposed to that it could be designed in an alternative way. So a lot of it is rely on your manufacturer, your manufacturing support team, your guys that you buy materials from are clever people. They know what they're doing. They have years and years of knowledge. They make this stuff, and they have to apply a lot of certifications to make sure that the materials you're using are not only safe, legal, but comply to a lot of compliance with sort of materials you can and can't use in that manufacturing process. So rely on your source of your material vendor to make sure they give you all of that stuff, and they will be able to provide you operational documents, handling documents that have the windows I've talked about for operation within the temperature window. So ask them. There's so much data that can be on. They don't have to guess these days. You can just make a phone call. Your salesperson, your contact at that supplier is your consultant. They're the guys that should be able to advise you with all this information. And don't be afraid to ask. It would be one of my key points.
Yeah, just to echo that really. I think it's, and we've touched upon it a few times today, the goalposts are changing. I saw a job earlier in the year, 3mm plate aluminium, painted black, south facing, fixings every 350, 400mm, and it was Boeing, 3mm plate aluminium. Who's ever seen that before? I've never seen that before, and I've only been doing this 36 years. So I think it's a reinforcement of the goalpost moving. Yeah, I mean, I'm a mere pup. It's that, and you need to be. I guess it's starting to read the room slightly different with it installs. If you're doing a fascia which is south facing, it's going to get the sun more. If it has got a dark fascia and it's going to absorb the heat more, Sean rightly says, then all of a sudden there might be a conversation with the customers like, if it hits 30 odd degrees for a few days and the sun does get on it, then you might see some temporary short-term bowing. But for 95%, 99% of the time, it would be absolutely fine, because the customer will probably want the cheapest solution. They might not be purists. They might not want a tray. So there's a whole world of, if they want a flat panel, then you just need to start to manage different conversations that you weren't having 10, 20, 30 years ago. 1976. I wasn't a sign maker in 1976.
I'm not that old either.
I didn't hear what you said, Sean, and I yes, you are, Craig.
Probably as well. Well, look,
1976 was also the hottest summer I've had. I think it matched to this year, didn't it?
Well,
yeah.
So my point exactly. You feel sorry for the poor sign makers in 1976. The fact we've referenced that, and this is on a parallel with that, gives you an idea of where the goalposts are changing. So, it is across all substrates, and again, you've always got the balance of the customer wants to think about their budget and their pound notes, and they might not be so signagey purist as us. Get that absolutely. But again, this sometimes comes with a compromise, and these are conversations we weren't having 5 or 10 years ago. So it is an interesting conversation. These triple whammies really got to be mindful of now. So we are seeing it for more than rigid substrates now, rather than just vinyls.
So.
A little bit. I think Sean mentioned, it's hot at the moment for a few weeks. Come December, it's going to be freezing cold. There's wind throughout the year, heavy rain, and all these things need to be dealt with, which is, I guess, is why when it comes to sign installations, use people that know what they're doing, experience, knowledge. You can see the knowledge here just talking now, but also all around the country, all part of the BSGA. And the BSGA is here to support sign makers in this process. I don't know, Craig, if you want to finish off by saying, just sort of summarising how we are helping the industry to sort of deal with these issues.
This comes back to the elements to try and have the community so people can have the conversation. My thing that I try to get across to everybody, whether they're actually in the association or in the trade, is come and talk to us. If you've got a question and you don't know the answer, we probably know somebody who can give you guidance. And that's the thing, is actually, we all want to provide good quality signage. I very rarely come across somebody who's just want to throw something up. We have an industry that has pride in what it provides. So actually, let's help each other. But if we can be that conduit, and I'm not trying to be grandiose here, if we can be the conduit to make those things happen, that's actually superb. We keep the quality high, we keep the customer satisfied, and I'll say that we don't have that horrible race to the bottom where we're just going to provide the cheapest product at the cheapest price. Nobody's happy, nobody's making any money. We're in this to make a living. It's not a dirty word. It's actually something that we all want this industry to thrive. And we make it thrive by producing product that has sustainability and lasts, if you like. Sorry, that's what it is.
Good way to finish. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for doing this.